TV party tonight! Oh!
We got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Pearson at Blurnsville.
Futurama!
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting Premier Podcast TV Party Tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, I am joined by Robert Winfree, who made a special request of me once again. This is one of his deals. He said, tonight our favorite show is going to be The Babadook, the movie, The Babadook, which is brought to you by the good people at Screen Australia, Causeway Films, Entertainment One, and Umbrella Entertainment. It was released at the Sundance Film Festival, January 17th, 2014, released in Australia, May 22nd, 2014, and has a extremely high rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Apparently the critics just love the shit out of this movie. And so does Robert Winfree. Robert Winfree, how do you do, sir?
Well, better than you, old Slurpy Joe.
I'll tell
For
you.
those of you who don't know, I'll be brief about this. Mark and I were supposed to record this show yesterday. We got on the call, and Mark was not his usual self. When I inquired, his response was, "Yeah, I got teeth issues." He's more descriptive than that, but I'll leave it at that. So when I told...
Actually, I think my exact words were, ow.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. So I told him, if you're not really in shape to do this, that's fine. And he went, oh, thank God, and peaced out. About that quickly. Fortunately, I think entirely to avoid me ridiculing him for another prolonged period of time in public, we rescheduled, so Mark has had his teeth issues dealt with. He's all normal and happy and on a liquid diet for the next, couple of weeks.
I'm on sippin' soups, which, by the way, just as an aside, like, when you can't talk because your mouth hurts so much and people ask you stupid questions, I don't think there's anything more annoying on earth. So you're sitting in a dentist chair and you're waiting for them to extract your impacted wisdom teeth, and they ask you, have you eaten today? And I'm like, yeah, I've ate 3 hours ago, because apparently you're not supposed to eat close to surgery, which makes sense.
You're really not.
And then they're like, I hadn't had anything, and no one told me not to eat, so I figured at 11 o'clock in the morning I can have a sippin' soup. And he's like, what's a sippin' soup? And I'm like, look, I'm sorry you're not from this planet, but a sipping soup can be found in the grocery store. Shut the fuck up and extract my teeth already.
I've never heard of sippin' soups.
Are you shitting me?
Unless this is some kind of regional dialect for something else. No, I've never seen that particular product.
Okay, do you shop for yourself at your local grocery store?
Of course I do, Mark. Come on.
I don't know. I don't know what your living situation is or who shops in your home.
Fair enough. I go shopping, yes.
I'll go to the soup aisle. And in the soup aisle, there's two different Campbell's sippin' soups. These are one serving size microwavable smooth soups, and they come in a variety of different flavors, and they're all I'm living on those and protein shakes because I can't chew food right now.
How long ago did those come out?
I mean, I've seen them in the store forever, so
forever is a subjective period of time in your case.
I mean, I knew they were there, and I've had them before because they're good for lunches and stuff.
I bring it up because I've done a lot of work in supermarket retail.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I've stocked a lot of soup. Okay, I've put a lot of those cans on the shelves.
Okay,
and I still cannot, for the life of me, remember ever having done so with those. Or I don't know, maybe they're just called something else a little bit different here.
Well, the brand that I bought is Yes Sipping Soups, YES Sipping Soups, and they're made by Campbell's. But Campbell's also has another line of sipping soups, which is basically the same thing, only they're not as. I only saw 2 or 3 different varieties. There was 2 different kinds of tomato soup, and then there was a chicken noodle that actually has little stars and everything in it. But if you just want plain old smooth soup because you can't chew jack shit, you want the Yes Sippin' Soups. Those are smooth. Well, the corn's got some. The poblano corn's got some corn in it, but everything else is smooth.
I will look for those next time I'm in there, and this might be one of those things that just I've lived around forever and just have never thought of them by that particular name.
Yeah, again, unless you're like looking for like soup for lunch or whatever, why would you buy those? You know what I mean? Like I'm buying, like I have a lot right now because that's all I can deal with. But prior to my mouth blowing up, when was the last time I had a sipping soup? It was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Hey, the Babadook.
Yeah. So this, I need to give some appropriate backstory because you seem to misremember how this particular show came about. Last year, right around this same time, Mark and I have our review of the third season of NBC's Hannibal, which had already been off the air for 5 years. Because we are nothing if not current here. When we got done, Mark said, "Oh, that was great. So my one contractually obligated horror-themed show for next year, what's that horror movie you and Gavin kind of talked about being a little bit freaky?" And at which point I had to parse through your fragmented recollection of conversations. But it's good because I can basically read your mind at this point. I've told you guys this before. I listen to some of Mark's shows with other people. When he starts struggling for words, I know what he means. If he forgets a name or a product or what's the word I'm looking for? Because you do that. And there's like sometimes 3 or 4 other people. There's poor Jesse. There's the other podsman. And they're like, I don't know I can't help you, Mark. And I'm sitting here putting my head into a desk because I can read your mind. And we brought up the Babadook, and you said, "Yeah, sure, let's do that one, the Babadiddle." I think you made fun of your son's baby talk at some point in there. I bring that up just because you, I think, erroneously referenced, when you were putting this over earlier, you said, "Yeah, Winfree says this will crush my soul," and I kind of went, "Wait, what?"
Well, you
I've
talked
never
about
said that about the Babadook.
You talked about like how eerie this is and how like
I said it's scary.
Yeah, you put this against a variety of other horror films that I have struggled with, and I'll accept that when it comes to the horror genre, I can be a bit of a weenie. And you were like, "Oh, if you did kind of a comparison, like if these movies you've struggled with in the horror genre, you're never going to get through the Babadook because it's that much worse." I don't know what you're talking about. I watched it earlier in the week. It was fine. I'm not saying it's not a good movie. I'm not saying it's not a scary movie. But there are definitely... I think there's a misread on what I can tolerate and what I can't. I can't deal with gross. I can't deal with, like, torture porn. I can...
Well, sure, but I mean, who wants to?
That stuff, like, really, like, physically gets to me.
Why you will never talk about the Hellraiser movies.
Yeah, Hostel, Hellraiser. I'm good with the one Saw movie that I saw. I don't need to see that kind of stuff.
You were only good with that one because that movie is comically bad. And we reviewed that for Damn You Hollywood. It was terrible.
Yeah. But I like Paranormal Activity, like the first one and the second one. I like movies that build suspense, and I can deal with a haunted house movie like the Babadook as long as when you get to the eerie and scary parts, it doesn't get gross.
Well, again, I think what I meant when I was kind of poking you a little bit about this, and I promise, guys, we're getting to the movie. This is just a little bit of backdrop is important here. When we talked Paranormal Activity, you mentioned one of the things that these kinds of movies don't get to you in the sense that, I can't possibly watch this. But you mentioned that, these kind of very ethereal, scary movies that are good at building suspense are the ones that actually scare you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of more what I was poking at. Like, no. If you're a big weenie about Paranormal Activity, then the Babadook, which does, I think, is just a better variation on proper suspense building in scenes.
Okay.
is going to be a rough one for you in that respect. Not in the, oh God, I don't want to watch a man be force fed his own intestines.
Let me say this, and then I'll let you do the plot synopsis on this one. Horror is supposed to scare you. It should generate those feelings in you. That's its purpose. Just like action, is supposed to make you feel a certain way. Romance is supposed to make you feel a certain way. If you feel nothing during a horror movie, the horror movie has failed in its objective. So I'm okay with being frightened by an eerie, suspense-building situation. This was my problem with the second It movie, by the way.
Oh, don't even get me. You've heard because Alexis, I think it was Alexis, Jesse, and myself, or Andrew instead of Jesse. When we reviewed It Chapter 2, we all kind of went. We spent more time talking about. Sorry, I'm confusing that with. I'm confusing that a little bit with our review of Pet Sematary, but either way, we spent more time talking about It Chapter 1 than It Chapter 2.
Yeah, like It Chapter 2 just turned into a stupid monster movie, and, not that it got unwatchable, it just, I just got bored. I don't feel anything for this. This is, It Chapter 1, I was with it, and I watched it, and I was like, okay, I get why people like this movie, I get, what's happening to these kids, and it gets gross a little at times, but I was able to get through it, and it legitimately, produced some scares in me, and I was fine with that. It Chapter 2 got so stupid, I was I remember, I had to go to Moffat that day, so, I was just waiting for the movie to be over so I can get to my appointment.
Yeah, we did review, we have a review for It Chapter 2 if you're so inclined to go listen to that. But yeah, this one, very, very different in the sense, especially from that, the Babadook does a great job of actually, building the proper tension, of showing the right things to build tension, but not, blowing its load, so to speak. So,
all right, the Babadook plot, go.
The plot of this movie, as with most horror movies, the plot is somewhat secondary to the execution and subtext. We mostly follow
Amelia Vanek.
Amelia, that's it. I can never remember her name. Played by Essie Davis. We follow her and her son, who has issues. I've got to talk a little bit about him later. She is still she's still dealing with the death of her husband, who was killed in a car crash as they were on their way to the hospital when their son was being born. She's not sleeping all that much. Her kid is a handful. And life is difficult for single mothers in general, although you can't say that apparently anymore. So we're introduced to a little bit of that. Along the way, we then the kid finds a new book that he wants to be read as he goes to sleep. It's about Mr. Babadook. This does seem to invite the entity into their presence, into their house, into their lives, and we slowly start getting escalating events over the course of evenings. Strange supernatural happenings, people, lights going off and on, things not being where they're supposed to be, all that good stuff.
Glass in the oatmeal.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a real good one. She tries to destroy the book, but the book keeps coming back. There's a lot of other stuff we can talk about a little bit when we get into more specific stuff here, but things escalate, and towards the end, the Babadook's whole thing is, I'd like to kill the kid and get you to kill yourself. It's an evil, malicious entity. It winds up possessing her at one point. It very nearly does kill the child, but the maternal love she feels for her son is able to overcome it.
That, and the kid's pretty good at protecting himself.
Yeah. Look, Kevin McAllister 2.0. Yeah, the kid does rig a few traps, so it's not... it's not as bad as that, but we'll get to the specifics.
He also stabs her at one point.
Yeah, he does stab her with a kitchen knife in the thigh. She almost kills him, but she overcomes that. She has a final confrontation with the Babadook where she drives it into the basement. To close, she finds a bit more peace with her current status. She and her son become a little bit closer. And the Babadook winds up just kind of in the basement, and she feeds it earthworms and tries to kind of keep it contained and somewhat managed as their lives go forward.
This story deals with trauma and loss. The backstory on these characters is that on the day of Samuel's birth, the husband was driving Amelia to the hospital for the birthing and dies in a car accident. A pretty gruesome death, as near as I can tell. And
that was gnarly.
And Amelia has spent, he's 6 years old, so she spent the last 6 years continually mourning the loss of her husband and not really being able to move beyond that. I mean, she works, she takes care of the son. If the son were a perfect angel, she'd be less stressed out. But ultimately, she's not really over the death of the husband, and that plays a major role in how her relationship with her son develops and what she allows herself to believe or allows herself to be manipulated by the Babadook. And I think that's important to talk about.
It is, and I just want to preface this with the following. All of the truly great horror movies are not just about scaring you. I mean, don't get me wrong. They do that. They should do that. But, Alien, by way of example. Alien's not about the monster on the spaceship. It's about claustrophobia and isolation. And you can do this with all the truly great horror movies. There's always something else that they're about other than what is presented on screen. There's always something else that they're tapping into. There's always that kind of appropriate subtext and whatnot. The Babadook is, in addition to being scary, a profound meditation on grief, loss, and how do I say this? One of the things, I think he was either the director or the writer, or maybe both of them at different points. Some of the stuff around, motherhood and parenthood that you're not it's kind of phrased like you're not supposed to talk about. Yeah, you and I have complained at various points in time around certain movies that have been released, and I think we complain about it as a flaw in the writing. That a single mother in any sort of contemporary film or television project, they can't ask for help. And I don't mean this as a flaw of their character. If you have a character who is part of their character flaw is stubborn and independent, you can work with that. I mean, the writers will not allow them to ask for help for no reason other than we don't want to be labeled as misogynist, or we want to get invited to parties, or something stupid along those lines. So, rewatching this movie, that was a breath of fresh air, especially relative to current writing tropes and genre conventions. Because, you can speak to this. Parenting's hard.
Yes.
It shouldn't be taboo to say that.
Yeah, unfortunately, this reference will be utterly lost on you, and I can't remember what specific daytime talk show this was. But I remember one stupid talk show host had another stupid guest on, and she was like, "What do women want?" And the stupid guest got up and danced and said, "We want it all." And I've never been able to get that out of my head, because I feel like that's not realistic. And I think for most people, they acknowledge inside that's not realistic. And that they, there are, I'm sure, certain women who, for whatever their reasons are, and this isn't a meditation or an attack on that, but want to be a single mom. But most people don't. Most people don't want to be single parents. Parenting is hard.
Sane people do not wish to be single parents.
You know, and I don't want to get into like the specifics of why that might be. What I'm saying is, raising a child is, you know, it's a very time-consuming, exhausting job, and it's totally worthwhile. And it's, you know, and it's what keeps me going. You know, like my favorite job on earth is to be a dad, but I would not want to do this without my wife. And I feel bad because, you know, when I get sick, or, you know, things happen to me this past year and I've not been able to contribute as much as I would like to, she's like basically parenting on her own, and and that makes me feel guilty. And I think there's a lot of people out there who kind of struggle with this, to where they, you know, you can be frustrated with your child in the most normal of circumstances. Now imagine you're a widow and your child's a handful, and, you know, like when you have that child in the hospital, and God bless you if if your child was born perfectly, you know, normal and healthy, and you take the child home, and that's really when the fun starts, because that's when you have to make sure they don't fall off the bed. That's when, you know, they make sure they don't get pneumonia. These are all things that have happened, you know, and then it's like as they get older is where they, you know, like any other normal person, is where things start to happen, and you're like, well, never expected this. Like, you don't know, you know, what's going to happen to your child as they get older. You do the best job you can, and you prepare them for the worst, and you hope for the best. But it's exhausting, and so like the idea of like the parent losing their patience and wanting to shove their kid in an oven. It's a horrible thought, and nobody wants to talk about it out loud, but it absolutely is a thought that people have.
My only issue with the people is when you have that thought and then you like make a plan. Like, of course we've all had. I don't have any children, but I was. My two youngest brothers came along when I was like, 14-ish, like 12 to that 12 to 14 range.
Hang on, I made a joke to Sean Comer once about wanting to, you know, like, if you've never had a moment at night when you're trying to get your kid to sleep and you just want to punch them to bed, you know, like, then you haven't really been a parent, and you shouldn't obviously act on it. You shouldn't punch your child. But, like, the thought in the back of your mind, especially when they won't go to sleep for whatever the reasons are, and you just want to hit that child into being comatose. And Sean, you know, God bless him, has not had the experience of having a young child. He's got a teenage stepchild. But he was, like, horrified that I said that. And I'm like, no, dude, talk to actual parents. talk to parents who have had young children.
Teenagers present an entirely different set of problems, and, you know, God bless anyone who puts up with all of it, because we all were at some point or another.
There's a reason why Go the Fuck to Sleep was a popular book.
Yes, there is. That just kind of, you know, you have those thoughts because I don't want to get into. I don't know. I mean,
you get
any
frustrated.
Number of reasons why. I mean, yeah, you're frustrated. Somewhere in the back of your mind is, you know, my life used to be something else. Mm-hmm. Now it's this, as you stare down at yet another full diaper.
It's the Serenity Prayer, you know. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And you're dealing with an entity that you have almost no control over.
I forget who the comedian is that said this. I never quote comedians when it comes to anything that matters, because their job is not to matter, their job is to be funny.
Right.
But there was one who mentioned, and I can't for the life of me remember which one it was, who said, you know, I have this child, and if you're not a parent, you can't understand how two things can be true at the same time. Like, the love I feel for you is so profound, it has retroactively changed how I feel about other people in my life from before you were born. This is deep, this is profound, this has altered me in ways I can't fully articulate and comprehend, and I would die for you, and at the exact same moment regret every single life decision you made that led to this point. And again, I have no children, but enough people have said, yeah, that's true, for me to kind of just go along with it. And again, my only issue with people like that is if you start a plan. If you have the thought, that's human. Everybody does. If you plan it out, then we got a problem, buddy. That might seem like an odd kind of tangent to go on here about this, but for this movie, but you have to understand, this movie is, again, fundamentally about this woman trying to process grief, trying to be a single parent, and her son is, to put it kindly, a handful.
He's building, like, when we meet Samuel, he's already decided that there are monsters in the house. And this is before the Babadook, right? He's just decided...
This is just his active imagination.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to kill the monsters. And so he starts building weapons and traps in case the monsters come in. And it's like, and like he launches a ball out a window. He brings a crude crossbow into school. And like the mom is just like, go the fuck to school and learn. Like, stop worrying about, and the other thing is he's so wired up about the monsters in the house, he's not sleeping, and so he's constantly waking up the mom, who has her own full-time job and can't get to sleep at night. And so, like, Samuel's not a bad child. He's acting out his imagination, and I don't know if there'd been a second parent in the house, how much that would have changed things. This is also a movie, and so he's written to be... And I find Samuel to be a fascinating character study because, on the one hand, I think as an audience member, you identify with the mother wanting to nigh strangle Samuel.
On occasion.
Because, it's like, can't you be normal for 5 fucking minutes? The whole first half an hour of the movie, before we even get to the Babadook, he's involved with his cousin... and he's building traps, and he's just, and it's just like, this woman gets
into these unreasonable positions, and I overshare with strangers in the supermarket.
Yeah.
And you just kind of want to put your head through the wall like, kid.
Yeah, like, it's unrelenting. On the other hand, he's also a child, and a 6-year-old boy, and, boys are going to do what they're going to do. But, not every boy is the same, but there's certain similarities, I think, among all boys, certain characteristics that they all share. And whether or not a secondary parent there would have been able to rein some of that in, I'm not going to say. But there is none, and so it goes unreined in. Not to mention the fact that, as we said before, she's already dealing with the loss of the husband after 6 years. So... It's not a setup for a great relationship between the mother and son. Like if there's going to be a mother and son situation that invites a demon into the house, this is going to be the one.
Yeah, Samuel's an interesting case because they're able to tread the appropriate line with him.
Yeah, like I don't hate him. I sympathize with the mother, but I don't hate him.
Which is the line you have to be very careful not to cross when you're writing this kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
If you start rooting for the monster to kill the kid, you've done something wrong.
Right.
I mean, I've said that, look, this has come up in, any long-running horror franchise has eventually gone on the wrong side of this. Reggie the Reckless, you know who you are. Just by way of example, but it's happened in all of them. And trying to find that balance is important because if this kid isn't a little bit out of control, then the mother becomes wholly unsympathetic.
Right.
Again, if this kid is an angel, then you kind of look at the mom and go, I can't possibly root for you. What are you doing? If the kid's too far out of control, you wind up going, please, strangle the kid and get him off screen.
Yeah, and I have to give the actor credit. Let's see who plays Samuel here. Noah Wiseman, first of all, has an awesome look for movies. That he really does. He has a very interesting... Like, he is perfect for horror movies because his facial features and his acting in this movie are right on that line to where I don't want you to die, but if you say mama one more time, I might come through the screen and punch you myself.
Yeah, again, you never want them to shove him in the oven, but you do kind of think, life was better when you could beat your kids.
They're in the park and he's on the swing set and he's like, Mama, look at me. Like she can't even have a conversation with her sister. Mama, look at me. Mama, look at me. Mama, look at me. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow. Mom of the year. She's a saint for not beating that child.
Yeah. And then he takes a crossbow to school with a dart. I'm like, and God bless the woman. She did not immediately throw her child under the bus.
Right. Yeah, when the school's like, we've done everything we can. He's gonna need someone. He's gonna need someone to sit with him.
Look, my mom's a speech language pathologist, and so she does a lot of this work with difficult. She doesn't just do speech language. Because of what she does, she also works with difficult. She's part of the behavioral unit, I think is one of the things they call it on occasion. And that's really just what the kid needs. Mm-hmm. He's 6. He's trying to figure out boundaries like all 6-year-olds do. And the generalized structure of that classroom is clearly not meeting those needs. And when the mother's like, no, he just needs some understanding, and you could tell that teacher wanted to smack the mother. Like, I got 30 kids in my class.
What part of you brought a crossbow are you missing?
And your kid brought a functioning crossbow to school. Lady, one of us is in the right here. Credit to the actors and the writers and the director, because that's a difficult line to walk, and they do it, expertly as far as that goes in this movie. So serious kudos all the way around on that. So once we've established the relationships and we've established the characters, that's when they have a bedtime routine where she reads a story to him. And in this particular case, he brings her the Babadook book. And they read through the book, and it's basically like through reading the book, they've acknowledged the creature, and that opens the door. And the creature plays upon her anxieties and her trauma and her grief and her frustrations. Like, basically, she has all this grist for the Babadook mill, and the Babadook preys on it. And through the next, through the middle part of this movie, the second act, it really kind of switches to haunted house. There's a lot of paranormal activity stuff going on, doors slamming, windows shutting, things like that. Glass in the oatmeal that she thinks is Samuel's fault. Everything gets amped up, little by little. And I thought, hiding under the bed covers while the creature menaces you from above.
Yeah. And it's typical horror structure, but I'm okay with typical horror structure as long as it's done well. This movie, every scene, every step amps up the menace from the monster until it finally explodes in madness. And so I thought the movie did a really good job of doing that. I thought it kept the movie going. There was some release of tension, and then there would be a rise of tension, then it would release, then it would rise, but each time you're getting more and more menace from this creature until finally she loses her fucking mind, and and we're into the third act.
And, she kills the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that hurt.
Well, I'll tell you, my favorite part of the movie, is when she gets rid of the book the first time, and it comes back, and the book shows her future of killing the dog, strangling Samuel, and then cutting her own throat. And I was like, wow, that is super fucking creepy. And that's the thing, this movie does a lot with very little. It's a very minimalist movie, but it got the best scare out of me with the book, and showing the terror that that's going to befall this woman and tragedy with just a little children's pop-up book. And then her reaction to that is priceless. Like, she burns, she takes outside, she barbecues the book, and then she goes to the cops, and they're like, "Do you have any evidence that you're being stalked?" And she's like, "Well, I burned it. See."
Like, yeah, we need evidence. There's a lot really good about this movie as far as classic horror structure. All of the scenes are well. This movie also understands its. When you mentioned they do a lot with a little, there's movies that get a low budget and then try to. They seem almost like petulantly annoyed that they have a low budget, so they try to make a big budget movie on a low budget, and it just looks awful.
Mm-hmm.
This movie just makes the absolute most of everything that it has at its disposal.
Yeah, it's not Poltergeist.
One of the instances in that.
Like, Poltergeist has, like, it's another haunted house movie, but those scenes are gross. You have Craig T. Nelson peeling his face off. You have the tree eating the kid. It's just a lot of...
Not Craig T. Nelson.
All right, we've had this argument before. It is fucking Craig T. Nelson. Give me a minute. All right,
it's really not. It's one of the cameramen.
All right, so cast in the movie. Craig T. Nelson is in the movie. Yes.
He's not the one who peels his face off.
Who else would be shaving?
They have the camera crew in there at that point. I'm 90% sure it's one of the camera crew.
You keep going. I'm gonna read the plot synopsis real quick.
The plot synopsis won't tell you that. You'll have to look up the scene on YouTube.
Yuck.
Then don't complain. Maximizing what you do have is really the best way to go about this, and they don't have a big budget, so they don't show. Rather than have the big reveal of the Babadook's form be a CGI mess, they just eschew that in favor of letting your imagination do the work, which is always scarier than anything they could put on screen anyway. And that's a lesson a lot more movies need to take their cues from. If you don't have the budget for something, finding a workaround is a lot better than trying to make something that would look maybe okay if you had 5 times the amount of money on, again, a fifth the amount of money.
All right, so it might not have been Craig T. Nelson.
Thank you.
What? He's in the gross scene too, isn't he?
Probably. He's the one who falls down into the pit and is accosted by the corpses of the Indian burial site that they didn't move.
You didn't move the bodies.
You just moved the headstones. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I can move on from this now.
Okay. You got to take my word for some stuff like this, man.
But what I was bringing up is instead of doing jump scares and using atmosphere and then immediately going into Grossville, the Babadook doesn't do that. The Babadook has the same kind of level of menace and producing fear without having to be gross, which I really appreciated about the movie.
Oh yeah, I do tend to, whenever we talk about this, I reference Stephen King's hierarchy of horror. He talked about this in Danse Macabre. He tends to categorize movies or horror stories, whatever the medium, into 3 different categories. You have terror, which is the highest order. That's the stuff that not only scares you, but really kind of sticks with you. You have horror, which is scary, but a bit more ephemeral, a bit more fleeting, and tends to come from... Terror tends to, resonate deep within your psyche. Horror is a bit more purely... It resonates, but it's not as deep. And the lowest tier was the gross-out tier, which is just showing people disgusting things.
All right, so let's talk about... Let's get in... Unless you have a whole lot you want to talk about with the second act here, let's move into the third act, where basically the Babadook has taken control of this house. This woman hasn't slept at all. She's got the kid on some sleeping medication that she got from a psychiatrist, but and that helped to a degree, but it didn't deal with the larger issue of you have a demon in the house. So there's this one night where basically the Babadook takes hold of Amelia, and she's like telling Samuel to eat shit, and she kills the dog, and she nearly kills Samuel, and then it turns into Home Alone when all of his traps start working, and he throws the ball at her, hits her with the dart gun, he trips her down the stairs, literally, like Home Alone, stabs her with the kitchen knife, and then knocks her out. And I thought this was brilliant. Knocks her out and then like ties her to the floor, and now the Babadook can't get to the kid, and she ends up like getting out of the binds, and she like vomits out the Babadook.
Yeah.
Later on, she'll be confronted by the ghost of what she perceives to be the ghost of her dead husband, who's like, "Let me just kill the kid, and this will all be over for you." And I want to get your opinion on this, because this is the only part of the movie where I was like, "Huh?" Like, kind of. I don't know if I love how they resolve the issue. She basically yells at the Babadook. She rejects it. She yells at it. It goes into the basement, and then they keep it as a pet.
Well, you have to understand what the Babadook represents in this particular instance. This is much more metaphorical.
Okay.
When we get to the ending, the Babadook is her grief and her trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The finale sequence is her finally letting go of what used to be her, confronting her trauma, processing it with it, starting to move forward. But anytime you suffer that kind of loss, that kind of trauma, it doesn't evaporate. It doesn't go away. It's always going to be part of you. The question is, what do you do with it?
Mm-hmm. And like, don't get me wrong, I understand she's not going to. I understand she's not going to whip out a proton pack, and put it in the thing. This was kind of my issue with It Chapter 2, to bring that up again. I'm trying to think of like good resolutions to horror movies. Like, how did they deal with Freddy in A Nightmare on Elm Street? Did they yell at him too?
The first one?
Yeah.
There's an open-ended question about whether or not they actually dealt with him, because, not only does he come back, but that particular movie ends with a heavy intimation that he was never gone. No, you have to understand, they set this up in the movie a little bit, but she turns her back on him deliberately because he gains power the more you talk about him, the more fear you have, the more energy you give Freddy. That's where he draws his power, right?
Right.
So she deliberately turns her back on him, both symbolically and literally, to withdraw the energy she's giving him, and he fades.
I think I'm just over nagging the monster to death. And I hear what you're saying about she's confronting her trauma, it's metaphorical. I'm not trying to be a dummy about it. I accept that as an adequate answer, and that's fine. I think in isolation, it works for this movie. My problem that I'm drawing a criticism around is I think I've seen it too much, and I've seen it done badly, so I'm kind of over it.
Which is fair. Like, if we're talking about the state of horror more generally,
mm-hmm.
That's very true.
The thing that seems to defeat the horror monster in most movies is nagging.
This is also a byproduct of you not watching a lot of horror, just for the record.
Fair enough.
Now, that being said, given what you do watch, and I know what horror movies you watch because you only watch them when you have to. So, given what I know you have seen of them, I certainly understand why you look at that and go, yeah, this is a problem. And you're also not wrong in the sense that, like, It Chapter 2 was a real misread to have it end like that.
Mm-hmm.
To have that be the way they beat the monster. And it does happen, it does come up, and it tends to come up especially in horror movies that are, rightly or wrongly, aspiring to something other than generic monster that you can beat by throwing enough chainsaws at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get the function of, these are, metaphorically, this is about taking back your power. This monster has taken all the power from you, and you, by confronting it, are taking it back. You have to be careful with that, though, because it's the same, girl yelling at monster is way overdone to the point where, like I said, it's hard for me to accept it as a resolution because I feel like it's become too much of a trope.
It doesn't help that we are watching this movie this movie came out in what, 14?
Mm-hmm.
So it actually does predate a lot of the movies that you're complaining about.
Fair enough.
In that respect. So, again, I'm not saying that it's an unfair criticism of where kind of the genre's going and where the genre has gone in a lot of ways, but just do be aware. You're looking at more kind of like the progenitor of this, and it's fairly easy when it's done well to see why people tried to copy it.
Yeah, like I said, I watched the movie and I didn't I recognized the trope, but it was done well enough, and I thought it was interesting. And this is where we haven't gotten to yet, that she kept it in the basement. I thought, well, that was an interesting way to end this. So, like I said, I don't dislike it. I think it was if I accept the movie as it is with no other influences, I'm fine with the way this ends. My problem is when I start comparing it to the horror genre in general.
Which is fair. Much as we always try to watch these things in isolation, it's not unfair to point out a general trend. It's
right.
Unfair to unduly hold it against the movie, which, to be abundantly clear, you're not doing.
All right.
Yeah, I like that because, again, it's the metaphor of how you deal with trauma. You don't reject it. It doesn't go away. You process it. You deal with it. It becomes part of who you are. And you do everything you can to keep the unhealthy, destructive influences of it in the metaphorical basement.
Anything else you want to talk about? We can stay on the third act. I liked how once that part of the resolution was done with, I did like how she was able to process the death of her husband, and she recognized Samuel. A lot of the resentment seemed to have filtered away, and she was looking to get him into a new school, and she's talking to the DCF workers, I think they were, in the final scene. And it's just they have turned a page, and she loves her son, and it moved forward, and it was a very nice ending. I thought that part of the resolution was super concrete and worked really well for the movie. And that was it. I'm glad there wasn't a jump scare at the end. But I wanted to get your thoughts and whatever else you wanted to say about the third act and anything else you might have on your mind.
Nothing in particular about the third act. I'm with you. I'm quite glad we didn't get a cheap jump scare at the end. We get a faux jump scare where she goes down to the basement and the creature roars at her,
mm-hmm.
and she's like, "Nope, calm down." Again, that is a beautiful metaphor for how you deal with grief. It's always going to rear its head, and you have to be able. You find methodologies and methods. Redundancy. Yay. You find ways of coping, of dealing. You find skills, but it never evaporates. So I appreciated that part of them. I appreciated that. I'm always going to be willing to kind of get on board and stump for a movie that not only maximizes everything it has, but especially a horror movie that tries to be deliberate and thoughtful about what it's doing, instead of just slopping crap at the screen. You're not dumping a chum bucket onto the broadcast surface.
Yeah.
Not that I can't enjoy those on occasion. I don't mind I don't mind certain gory movies, but the movies that I tend to really go to bat for in that respect are more ones like this that put the time into making a well-crafted movie before cheap jump scares.
If we haven't talked about it through the course of this conversation, and if we have, just say that. But if we haven't, why do you like this movie so much? Like, when you pick something and you want to share it with me, there's usually because it occupies a very high space in your compendium of film and literature, and you're like, these are the things that I really appreciate, and I want to share them with the people who I enjoy talking to, namely me. So, why do you like this movie so much?
I like that it's not cheap, and I don't mean in terms of its budget. There's a lot of cheap horror movies. This isn't one of them. This movie puts in the effort, puts in the time to earn its scares. It doesn't go for, anything very cheap and manipulative. It presents a very clear picture of what's going on. It gives us time with the appropriate characters. It's not afraid to... this isn't about, just shattering taboos for the sake of taboos. But works of fiction and whatnot are only going to... There's only so much time that they're going to be able to not say certain things before that propensity comes back to bite them. And so not saying that parenting is hard, not saying that a woman needs help. These are somewhat important things to bring up because it is true. The movie is also extraordinarily well crafted in terms of scares. I didn't see this movie in theaters. I watched this movie about 2 p.m. in my house, and it freaked me out.
Why did it freak you out?
Oh, it's when I say freaked me out, I mean in the way it's supposed to. It just scared me.
Okay, but can you expound upon that?
A well-crafted rising tension sequence will always get me. So, in particular, I think like the second or third nighttime sequence when she keeps looking at the corner and something's not right, but there's nothing different on screen. And then you hear the thing start moving, you hear it knock, and she's hiding under the covers, and it's just on the other side of that bit of cloth, and you can hear the sound design in this movie is very well done as well. Whatever kind of synthesis they put the voice actor's voice through for the Babadook is, it grates on your ears the way you want something that's supposed to be scary to grate on your ears. When she does finally get possessed and loses it, they've built to that whole sequence so well that you are rooting for the kid not to be violently murdered. But the movie's also kind of at a point where would you have been all that shocked if the creature had won?
Right.
And that kind of uncertainty is, believe it or not, very rare when it comes to horror movies. There's a lot of them that either telegraph their shocking bad guy wins ending or telegraph that, yay, the good guys walk into the sunset. There's especially if you're deep into the horror weeds, there's not a lot of ambiguity when you know how to read the signs properly.
Okay.
And I appreciated some of that. There's just, I wish I had a better explanation for the methodology behind it scaring me, but it did just kind of scare me at the places you want to be scared at.
No, look, I get it, man. Like, I think because there were 2 parts that scared me, and the rest of it I was kind of like, okay, cool, like, good movie. It did not resonate with me this way it seems to have resonated with you, and I watched it like 9 o'clock in the morning, just to tell you when I watched this. I will say there were 3 things that got to me for a variety of different reasons. One I've already talked about was the book. Like, that truly was the most horrifying part of this, was to see yourself kill your dog, kill your son, kill yourself. Like, I thought it was it was a way of being, like, producing a scare without doing the stupid shit.
Yeah.
The second thing was the glass in the oatmeal. And I think
as someone who's had glass in their mouth before, yeah.
You know, I just, you know, the whole concept of, like, you know, razors and apples, glass in your, you know, just all of that, like, that's an ephemeral just yuck for me. You know, that was one of those physical moments where I was grossed out by the movie. It's a good job there. Well,
and just very briefly, it invokes that reaction, but it's not gross. So
yeah,
double kudos. Isn't there a whole scene and whole like story arc in Oz where they're killing somebody by putting ground up glass in his oatmeal?
Yeah, they kill one of the Italian mob bosses that way.
There's another one who got rat poison in the chocolate bar, I seem to recall.
Yeah, they killed all kinds of people in Oz.
Yeah, that's after the third season or so. That's all that show became was, hey, people die. Some of them get raped along the way.
Yep,
good times.
Trying to think of the third moment where there was another moment in the movie that I was like, ugh. But it was definitely the glass, and it was definitely the book.
The kid shoving his cousin out of the treehouse.
It was fine.
Kid should have
been a bitch to him.
Fair enough. Was it maybe her fully reliving her husband's death, like that scene right near the end?
Maybe you know, maybe it was the head being sliced off. I'm not going to belabor the point. The point is, not everything is going to resonate with everybody the same way. This resonated with you, and I'm always curious to get kind of the psychology behind why things resonate with people and why they don't. This just didn't resonate with me that way. It did in parts, but not as a whole. As a whole, when it was over, I think I wrote in the chat, like, my typical reaction to things is, you know, it's fine. Oh, now I remember what it was. And the only reason why I remembered why I reacted the way that I did was because I was, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, when I watched it.
When she yanks her own teeth out?
Yeah, when she yanks her own, it's like she's holding her jaw and she's yanking her own. I'm like, I'm with you, sister. And she ripped out that tooth, and I was like, that's how I feel. And I have had visions this past week of ripping out the molars in my jaw.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, her killing the dog got me because, you know, it just does. I'm a dog person.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was cruel and horrible, but it was like I've seen people kill animals before.
I think one of my favorite scares is I like the subtlety in this movie because, again, there's so many horror movies that are just loud and cheap. So when she's, you know, doing dishes and looks over, waves at her neighbor, looks back at her neighbor and the things in the background in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, she breaks a dish, she looks down, she looks up, and it's gone again. I like stuff like that builds tension.
Mm-hmm. You talk about, like, movies that reward you for paying attention. Did you feel like this movie accomplished that?
Oh yeah, any horror movie that is reliant on atmosphere and detail like this, that's what they do. They want you to pay attention. They want you to understand the character interactions. If you don't, I mean, look, if you are half watching this movie, you want the kid to die. You have to kind of watch the movie and pay attention to understand why you don't want this intermittently annoying kid to have his brains bashed in. I mean, if you don't pay attention in some places, when she's desperately asking this, doctor, pediatrician for pills because the kid won't sleep. If all you do is get that in dialogue, it doesn't have the same reaction as if you've paid attention to this poor woman who, for 3 nights in a row, has had the experience of lay down, close your eyes, the kid's finally gone away, open your eyes, and oh look, 6 hours have passed. Because I don't know about you, I have been insomniac at various points in my life and will be in the future, I'm sure. I know that feeling. It sucks. When all you want to do is sleep, and then you are somehow denied the experience of sleep despite engaging in it.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up. Anything else about the Babadook you want to talk about before we end?
I think we pretty much covered it. It is a genuinely great horror movie. It's one of the few that, goes out of its way to scare you with more than something gross or something sudden. So, kudos. There's not enough of those.
All right. Well, next October, assuming the world doesn't end, we've got Dune, Halloween Kills, Snake Eyes, The Last Duel. There's a weekend here where there's nothing. Is there anything in particular that you think we should look at, a series or a movie? And okay, I don't want this to turn into another hour of you hemming and hawing. If you have something, go with it. If not, say, I will get back to you.
Profoundly tempting as it is for me to say, you and I should watch the first two. We should do the first two Hellraiser movies. Didn't
you and Sean do all the Hellraiser movies as A Long Road to Ruin?
Yeah, it took us 2 different episodes.
Right.
Because there were 9 of them. That's why I limited it to the first 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd be too uncomfortable with them. Something else horror themed. Because you, like most people who are, stupid about this, think, you can only do horror stuff this 1 month.
I live for themes.
We know. How's that going?
Not well.
Let me push the let me get back to you button on that. Let me think about it.
I've never actually watched the Friday the 13th movies. Like, I've seen 1 or 2 here or there, but like the really silly ones, I've never, like Jason in Space,
Jason X.
Jason Goes to Hell. Like, I know they're out there and I know they're over the top retarded, but I've never actually watched them. I've always been curious about them.
I would be the wrong person to talk about those with.
Okay. All right, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll come up with something.
I brought it up a few times. We probably should at some point do the Poltergeist movies. Meh, okay.
The Poltergeist movies are ones that tend to evoke strong emotions from people. I'm surprisingly lukewarm.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the first one. Then they kind of go downhill pretty rapidly.
Yeah, no, the first one I think is a solid movie, and the rest are unnecessary sequels.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where the third one is... Ugh, let's not talk about the third one.
All right, so instead, let's talk about what we're going to do next week, this year. So myself and Christian, we're going to review the 2018 and 2019 Betty Page Halloween specials, because hotsy totsy. And then myself and Pat Mullen...
Because there's nothing quite like talking about Betty Page in a purely auditory medium.
Goddamn right. We're going to do our Forgotten Sons episode of boxing, which is all the various nondescript heavyweight title holders and their various alphabet soup belts.
Yeah, like Deontay Wilder.
And then on Wednesday, we're going to continue our look at Yorn's pair of covers albums, Heavy Rock Radio 2, Executing the Classics. This past week, we did Lucifer, Devil in the Gateway on Source Material Live. Alexis Hana and the 2 Canadians, David Wright and Andrew Graham, discussed Lucifer 5.0. I had to cut out of that show early because they couldn't hear me for some odd reason. You can hear me clear as day on the recording, but...
Your Alexa showed up.
We talked about Yorn, Heavy Rock Radio 1, and this has been the Babadook. And then the last week, we got a whole shitload of shows. We were like doing double duty almost every day. On Monday the 26th, myself and Chris Sheehan will talk The Death of Hawkman, and then the Podsman, again doing double duty, will record our review of Hell in the Cell. Myself and Robert Winfree are going to do a comic strip. We're going to watch the movie and read the book The Empty Man and then compare it. During the day, however, myself, Robert Winfree, and Alexis Hana are going to talk The Wishes, which is going to make its debut. The remake is going to make its debut on HBO Max. On Thursday, we got Danzig sings Elvis, which is going to be fantastic. And
well,
then
well,
and then on Friday, another double duty. There'll be a Damn You Hollywood with myself and Alexis Hannah for the Craft 2020 or the Craft Legacy. And then the Podsman and I are going to talk about the NXT Halloween Havoc episode of NXT on Wednesdays. So we got a lot of shows for the last week of October. Hopefully by then my jaw is loosened up and not giving me agita. All right, now hey, this Khabib fight, is it really 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yes.
Ugh, I'm working.
Would you like to know why?
Yeah, I don't understand why. Like the last group of fights.
Prime time in that part of the world.
Yeah, I get that, but they didn't do that for any of the other Fight Island shows.
Yeah, but none of the other main eventers from the Fight Island pay-per-views have been big stars in that part of the world. Khabib is a giant star in the Middle East, in that part of Russia. Like, if all you know of Khabib's fandom and his star power is what you see in the United States, you don't understand how big a deal he is.
Well, I got to work that day, so that messes up my schedule.
Look, so buy it and watch it after the fact.
I might, Rabbit. I might.
Yeah, it's going to be earlier in the day, and it's going to be a pain in the butt for me. Because you have to remember that 2 o'clock in the afternoon your time is noon my time, and that's just the start of the main card. So backtrack about 4 hours. That's when the prelims start, and that's when I have to start.
Be a long day for you.
Yeah, it is.
That's also the same day as Dubois versus Joyce and Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz.
It will be nice to watch Davis and Santa Cruz, but the other one I don't care about.
Yeah, well. All right, do the rest of your plugs. Let's get out of here.
Let's see. You can find my full report for last week's UFC on ESPN Plus 37 and the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. I'm so sad that event drew so little attention. Because it featured one of the best knockouts you'll ever see. And the fact that Mark is not butting in to say, yes, that was amazing, tells me that even he, my stalwart St. Bernard of a friend, has decided to not particularly support my work. So thanks for that.
I was watching Effie's Big Gay Brunch.
You depress me on so many levels. Do me a favor. Click my coverage, click my report for it. You'll see it. I have all the finishes in video format embedded in there. You don't even have to...
I tuned out for a second. Are you talking about the one with the guy that mule kicked him to death?
Yes.
Did a mule kick knockout? Yeah, I saw that.
You probably saw that on Sports Center.
No, I saw your clip of it.
Well, I did share it on all of my social media feeds.
Yeah, whatever chat you put it into is where I saw it.
Yeah. So there's that. That whole event. Honestly, good event. I don't get to say that all that often, but that was a solid event from top to bottom. I complain about very little related to that event, which is nice. Doesn't happen this week. So tomorrow we'll have coverage of UFC on ESPN Plus 38 when the Brian Ortega returns from a near 2-year layoff to fight the Korean Zombie on a near 1-year layoff. The winner of this is your probable next contender for Volkanovski, so it's a relevant fight. It's a good fight. I'm curious to see what both guys look like. I mean, Brian Ortega hasn't been seen since he took that hellacious beating from Max Holloway. That was a beating, man. You remember that fight, right, Mark? Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding. You don't watch fights. So there's that. The rest of that card, though, little hit or miss. They lost their co-main event, so now it's Caitlin Chookagian and Jessica Andrade. I can't be bothered to care about Caitlin Chookagian. She somehow managed to be even a only moderately more interesting title challenger to Valentina Shevchenko than Liz Carmouche was, and that fight sucked. But you can find me this Saturday covering that. This Saturday, I'm not covering it, but I'm going to pimp it here because you should be watching. Free on ESPN. Let me reiterate this. Free. If you got ESPN, you got this fight. The pound-for-pound king, unified lightweight champion Vasily Lomachenko, fighting Teofimo Lopez Jr. And this has been timed out so that you should be able to finish the UFC card and then still watch that fight. If I had to choose, I would much rather watch Lopez Lomachenko than Ortega and Jung.
Also, is that earlier in the day on DAZN is going to be Louis Riston versus Miguel Vasquez.
Yeah, no one cares about DAZN. They're a terrible product. They're a genuinely terrible service. You can find me hosting the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, where I record Sundays. It's a look back at the week that was, a preview of the week to come. It's a good time. Wherever you can find podcasts, you can find my show there. This coming week, we'll review the Ortega Korean Zombie card and preview UFC 254, Khabib versus Gaethje. I cannot wait. That's going to be a great fight. It's got a really good co-main event, too. Robert Whittaker and Jared Cannonier. That's going to be a very telling fight for what comes next for Israel Adesanya. Because if Cannonier wins, we probably get Adesanya Cannonier. If Whittaker wins, that does open a bit more the possibility of a Jones-Adesanya super fight. So be on the lookout for that. So if you're into the sport of MMA, feel free to stop by there. You can find me most Fridays now. I am the official SmackDown coverage guy over at 411 Mania, so if you're into watching that, stop by, say hello. I appreciate it. I think my goal at this point is to just be so unbelievably bland. Like, I'm in this odd combination of dry and offending people. I'm mostly bland, but when I occasionally try to crack a joke, apparently people take offense to it.
Nice.
So you can find me. So I'm trying to kill the wrestling zone. That's my goal. It's just my presence there will drive everything down. That's kind of what it does. But you can find me there if you're into pro wrestling. Mark went over a lot of the stuff for the rest of the month. I can't say I anticipate our look at the Empty Man, but because Mark's process for scheduling is, this is adapted from a graphic novel. We can do both. Even though, no one wants either. So you can look. So there's that. Coming, we may as well mention this now because it's starting to come around. Mark, 4 years ago, you and I and Andrew Graham decided, hey, let's get together and talk over the election results, because people don't want to hear those ridiculous talking heads on mainstream news outlets. They suck. They do. So we got together, we had a live stream for election night in 2016. And because you're a giant pansy and had to work in the morning, you wound up calling it about 20 minutes before all of the news networks finally had their balls drop and called the election in favor of Donald Trump. For like 20 minutes, you and I were going, it's done. Suck it up and call it, people. But, we're just us. They're them. And this was such a big hit. Not a hit, but we enjoyed ourselves. That we're going to do it again. So if you're interested, Mark and I think Andrew, we're going to be having a live stream event, and because that's the only way we can do these things for something like that. We can't record it and re-air it later. It's going to have to be live. We will have a live stream and some relevant links for you on the evening. You can listen to us talk about election night instead of, again, talking heads who all suck, because they do. So be on the lookout for that. We don't talk a lot of politics here, so tune in for our loose political thoughts on that particular evening.
All right, folks. My jaw is telling me call it a night. So I want to thank Robert for talking the Babadook with me tonight. I certainly had a fun time. Until next time, be well, be safe, and behave.